In the Trenches with Ryan Roxie.
Rock and roll, the social media, politics, it all kind of goes around in our complete zeitgeist of where we are today. And I do want to talk a lot about music because that the theme of the show does have a music sort of thread through it. And the fact of the matter is, I was turned on to you because obviously I've seen you commentate on the Joe Rogan. I've seen you with Sam Harris. I've seen you with Jordan Peterson. I've literally watched hours and hours of interviews, just looking at listening to your views, and being really impressed by what I hear. And I think my rock and roll audience needs to hear a lot of your views as well. But out of the gate, I know that there's a little bit of misconception about how to introduce you at one point, because, you know, when I was trying to get the description for the podcast, I mean, some people, Dave Rubin, for instance, introduces you as a mathematician. Wikipedia says you're a venture capitalist. Logan Paul, who you had the balls to go on that podcast with, that was an interesting show as well, but you did a great job on it. His description is that you're a genius atheist Christian, whatever that means. So, I mean, how would you describe yourself and to people? And I know you get asked this question quite a lot, but just in sort of, I guess, Cliff Notes form, how would you describe yourself?
Well, I went with imposter when I was on Dave Rubin, and I kind of like that because I think that distinguishing between an imposter and a fraud is important to me. An imposter is somebody who may not have the credentials to be in a particular location, but has every intention of doing as good of a job as they can, if not better than the credentialed. So you may steal from the till, but you hopefully are going to put back more than you took by the time the day is over. A fraud is somebody who's just, you know, trying to fool you in an attempt to enrich themselves and screw you over. I think that part of why I do that is because we've become extremely worried about anyone deviating from his or her lane. So you hear "stay in your lane" a lot these days. And with open architecture of the internet, polymaths are particularly terrifying to people because they may roam around and opine in areas where they are not expert. And you, of course, have an issue there where you get a benefit from the fact that the person isn't usually captured by the dominant belief structure in that area, but that person has to pay it back by virtue of the fact that they are not, in fact, dedicated experts who stay only there. So in some sense, Ryan, not to be critical, you are an imposter as a broadcaster.
I was just going to say I'm a podcast imposter, but I do intend. I don't wish. I intend to actually become one of the best, at least in my rock and roll field. So, you know, and I'm listening to guys like you on your podcast, The Portal, to sort of grab tips every single episode.
Well, let me just say one other thing about the concept of the imposter. I've realized that a lot of the world's genius is riding on female shoulders, and that women, by and large, have a bigger issue with imposter syndrome because they don't give themselves the same allowances generically to screw up. And so for a while, I was going around talking about the need to not worry about imposter syndrome, and I don't know that I was very effective. But by embracing the imposter label, one of the hopes was that as a positive externality, a lot of people would say, okay, maybe I'm an imposter too. Now I don't have to worry about imposter syndrome. So the secret agenda behind calling myself an imposter is that if we could liberate the amount of intellectual horsepower that's currently inhibited by virtue of people saying, stay in your lane, or you don't know the topic and you're jawing off, you're a bullshitter, all of that kind of energy, imagine what the world could be like. So if people started to think of imposter as a wonderful thing, you know, taking a name like as was done for the word queer and spinning it around and turning it into a positive, then I thought that I could do no greater good in the world than to free up all of the people who've been inhibited and have not taken their shot on goal.
Imposter is no longer a pejorative, folks. Imposter is a good thing. And with that being said, Eric, would you consider yourself an imposter guitarist?
Absolutely. Oh my God. I mean, I think you contacted me after I think nobody had seen me post myself with an electric guitar ever. So
First one.
yeah, so I had a Mexican Strat and an old Princeton Chorus amp, which was not the right amp for me. And I then got a Positive Grid Spark amp on an Impulse, and I took my my guitar in to get it worked on. And holy cow, I had suffered for decades in a situation where I could have made myself happy with under $300, and I just didn't know it.
Well, how did the guitar find you? I mean, did it find you at a young age?
Oh, it's a horrible story.
Then please do tell.
Okay. It has to do with my grandfather, and I was musically hopeless. And I have a child who's musically hopeless and another one that's musically gifted. The musically hopeless child, we could not teach him middle C to say, as soon as we taught him middle C and then we taught him D and E above it, he would forget middle C. And it has to do with various learning issues in the family. And so I took 6 months of piano lessons, which is a total disaster. Nothing happened. And it had to do a lot with symbolic uptake. So my grandfather, who was musical, said, I want to get Eric a guitar. And my mom said, nothing doing. You're going to destroy his self-confidence. There's no ability. And he said, okay, all he needs to do is tune it, and then I'll be happy. He doesn't need to play it. So that was his way around. So he got me a nylon string guitar, which I brought just in case I needed to document this.
I love it. Please do.
And I learned to tune it, and then I started wondering how it worked, and theory became my way in. So I couldn't read music, and I didn't know how to do tablature. Everything symbolic is a huge drain on my brain. Like if I do symbols, I have to sleep for hours. It's really quite horrible.
But wasn't setting the goal for yourself to tune the guitar, that was a major sort of thing that perhaps maybe your grandfather gave it to you as a challenge?
No, he was just being devious. He was being devious. He was trying to get around my mom, because my mom had an idea in her head that this is just going to be bad. And my grandfather understood that if he could get the guitar into my hands, then I would find my own path. So he was the self-teacher who teaches self-teachers how to self-teach.
Well, you have an interesting approach with that. You have an interesting approach to learning music and to teaching. I think, it goes against sort of the educational complex, if you will. You have, I know you've talked about it before, and like, there is that old saying that repetition does learn something, and that whole 10,000 hours to learn something, but you necessarily don't agree with that.
Oh, well, that's somebody's process. So we're not knocking it. It works. But it's not everybody's process. And then if it's not your process, do you take away from that you're less than and deficient? And that's my issue. And it's funny because I now hang out with musicians who are way above my pay grade. And I don't think they even realize how discouraging what they say can be. For example, somebody recently said, you're not a guitarist until you sell one guitar to make rent, and then you buy it back at a later date or something like this. And I couldn't relate to that because I've never had any of these experiences. Or you're not a guitarist until a string breaks and you compensate for it and such and such. Well, all of these things are okay. Great. I'm not a guitarist, and that I have this idea in my mind that I'm not a. Yeah. Well, because you don't realize that people are listening in on your conversation, and if you think about great pedagogues, Guthrie Govan or Paul Gilbert, these people who are amazing. If you're not in that idiom, you think, well, okay, I'm not a guitarist. I'm just somebody who owns a guitar. I'm a guitar owner. That's what I am, and I think that's one of the things I've been talking about recently with Rick Beato, if you follow his channel at all.
Absolutely, we do, yeah.
And so I've been saying, why don't you guys recognize that a lot of us don't know where we are? We're certainly above some level, but we're below other levels. It's not that we've had a linear progress. And bringing the non-guitar guitar community, for example, in, because we watch these shows and can I just say this, the greatest delight for me is I'm sitting theoretically in the seat where Nita Strauss and Joe Satriani.
Yeah, Joe Satriani was right there, and he was in the same state, and Nita Strauss as well. She was just on last week. We had a really cool band meeting for those of you that are in the chat right now, because we do have a live chat, and I haven't done this, because we were so bogged down with getting the show started. I didn't really give credit where credit's due. Our live chat over on the Ryan Roxie YouTube official channel, we're very happy to have you in there. Thank you very much. We appreciate you for listening to the audio broadcast, which is Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and all those. We really appreciate it. But we have Eric Weinstein on the program here. You want to get in our live chat right now, just hit that subscribe button. And you're in that same position that Joe Satriani. In fact, that I think was one of the selling points to getting you on this show.
Well, no. It scared the living crap out of me. I have such respect for these people that, one of the things you have to understand is that we who don't play in that idiom and at that level, we are very respectful, I think, in general. It's not a Dunning-Kruger thing. But on the other hand, you have to connect to those people. Like, you may know that you're not Jimi Hendrix, but when you pick up a Strat, it has special significance because that Strat has been imbued with mystique and mysticism. It's a talisman. It's something magical and wonderful. It's one of the reasons that I'm so focused on, we have to get our great musical instrument companies. I mean, Fender, Gibson, PRS, all these, Positive Grid. I'm really excited about getting people to reacquaint themselves with the magic of music that isn't coming through a computer, but is coming through your fingers.
We are so much on the same page. So much and so.
I'm Ryan Roxie, and I've taken all my years of experience of playing guitar, and I want to pass the torch of rock and roll on to you. Check out the System 12 Guitar Method.
Hello folks, Roxy here. Thanks for watching the video. And if you liked it, hit the subscribe button or one of the videos around me to watch more. If you'd like to, please leave a comment. If you didn't like the video, maybe you'll forget how to type. Thanks.